Hey Mycophiles, it's Anna McHugh. I'm out in mid-October 2021 looking at mushrooms, and I have a wide array of species that I want to share with you today. Some of my favorite edible mushrooms in the fall, also a couple of just beautiful or toxic or unusual species. Unusual by which I mean they're attractive and they catch the eye, not necessarily rare things. So, I'm in a mushroom patch that is very diverse. I have collected a number of species to show you, but this is definitely not everything that's available, but certainly everything that is within the purview of a short video to cover, some of my favorite fall edibles and just fall species in general. So I will begin with the edibles. The later part of the summer and early fall, we still have some chanterelle mushrooms hanging on. This is the Cantharellus genus. We have an interesting thing, I kind of call it the changing of the guard. That's sort of, our summer mushroom season begins typically in June, really peaks in July. And then as the weather starts to change, we get a, blossom of a lot of species that are sort of more preferential to cooler weather. But we also still have some of these warm weather mushrooms out. So right now we have this sort of blossoming of, two groups essentially. So you have a lot of diversity inclusive of chanterelles. I wouldn't expect to see many more of them this year. One of the things that's nice about them when they, grow in cooler weather is they're a little more bug resistant. Since it's been drier, these are also a little bit more firm. But as far as identification, if you're not familiar, chanterelles are really common. They have, what is called a false gill. So it's just basically, not deep and blade-like. They're wrinkles that go down the stem. Oftentimes, you have a slightly fruity aroma. This one does have that feature. And then on the inside, your flesh is going to be white and stringy like string cheese. There are lookalikes that I don't have, but chanterelles I would rate as one of the, if you're going to start hunting wild mushrooms, this is probably one of the very first places to start. And, in part because they're so recognizable, but they're also abundant, and they are mycorrhizal, meaning they grow in association with trees and plants, so they come back in the same place year after year. So this is a great, find your patches and run to your patches when the weather changes kind of mushrooms. And then, finally, it's just kind of difficult to misidentify them. So they do have lookalikes, but those lookalikes are pretty distinctive. And also, one of them, the jack-o'-lantern mushroom, can make you lose your lunch from either end of your body or both ends of your body. But it is pretty different looking from our chanterelles. So, number one, that you will see this in the fall still. There's actually a whole lot of them out. I'm not exactly sure which species this is. I think it could be either Cantharellus deceptivus or Cantharellus phasmatus, which is also called the ghost chanterelle. I only say that because these are very, very light in color on the false gill portion, and they're lighter in color. There's a couple of them that are actually quite peachy, but it doesn't pick up well on this camera, unfortunately. So you have your chanterelles, and as you can tell, there's a lot of different species of them, but all of them share those common identification characteristics that I just told you about. The thing that I'm really excited about today is actually the Hydnum mushroom. So this is a hedgehog mushroom. It is actually in a condition that it's in good shape. It's just that it's been picked. So, hedgehog mushrooms are one of the easiest to identify. And also, these are my favorite mushrooms. I've thought for a very long time about what my favorite wild edible mushrooms are. And I've decided it is Hydnum/hedgehogs. So they are very distinguishable by the fact that they're sort of a creamy color. This particular species, and a lot of the species we have in the southeast, get this radical, orange staining. So that is, a consequence of me handling it. When I first picked this mushroom, it was much more like the color that you see right here consistently. But as I start to handle it, it, takes on that bruising. The thing that makes hedgehogs really easy to identify is that they don't have gills and they don't have pores. They have little teeth. And so, there are some other mushrooms that have teeth, but they're not easily mistaken for this mushroom. Either they're inedible because they're really chewy and corky, or very, very bitter. But I did do a video on Hydnum and had some, kind of more attractive specimens. But to be perfectly honest, of all the things I've found today, I came across a huge patch of hedgehogs, and so I'm as delighted as can be. And we have hedgehogs in the same way we have chanterelles. We have a lot of different species of them, and so there's, I think, 16 or 17 in the eastern United States. And we see them, in the summertime, not nearly as numerous, but in the fall, and then even into the, darkest depths of winter, there's a couple of species. There's Hydnum vagabondum, which is my favorite, and it's this, cool weather, kind of darker colored hedgehog mushroom. So we see these throughout the year, and I am always on the lookout for them because, again, they're really, really delicious. They have this sort of like nutty thing. They're crunchy. They impart a lot of flavor without being an overwhelming flavor. So there's a lot to recommend the hedgehog. So those are two of my favorite edibles. I'm going to go to one that is slightly more challenging from an ID perspective. This is a mushroom I am going to wiggle around at you. This is Artemisia pyxidatus, also known as the crown-tipped coral mushroom. It is kind of dainty and, however, a little bit fibrous and a little bit, on the tough side. So you can put a little bit of pressure on it without it breaking apart. It's really distinguished by having these little tipped crowns, sort of crenellated crowns. It's a little hard to get the right focus. There we go. There's a good focus point. But they're still really small. So they have these, 4 little prongs on the end, right at the tips. And this is a good mushroom as far as edibility because, at least from my perspective, I like their texture. So I didn't used to like them because they don't have a lot of flavor. They can be even slightly bitter. But I put rosemary on them and a bunch of salt, and I threw them in the oven and made them crispy. And my opinion of them has since changed. So Artemisia pyxidatus grows only on wood. There are look-alike mushrooms. So I'm going to show you an example. This is a sample of the Romeria genus, also known as a coral mushroom. There's a gajillion different species. They come in all kinds of colors, but they are, fleshier than your Artemisia mushroom. And additionally, the vast majority of them grow on the ground. So you'll see Artemisia pyxidatus. It's much, its fingers are a lot smaller. It's a little bit more robust. And also it grows on wood. Romeria grow on the ground. You do have a Romeria I was not able to find called Romeria stricta that is unfortunately very tall and skinny and has this sort of buff color. It's a little bit more on the gray side, and it does sometimes grow on wood. I haven't actually observed that, or at least, remember that I've observed that. But folks, in addition to saying, okay, if it's fleshy, it may be Romeria, Romeria stricta does grow on wood, so you have a possible complication there. But, Romeria typically most people consider them to be like edible with caution. Some of them do cause gastrointestinal distress that is non-life-threatening but unpleasant. And so, even though it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's edible, a lot of people choose not to eat them, myself included. So, you do have a lot of different species of them. And I think my main thing about them is they're just so elegant because you have these beautiful branches and, the pyxidatus has these nice little crowns, but, you get a far more like organic ocean floor type of look with Romeria that I really fancy. So we have our Romerias, we have our Artemisias, we have our Cantharellus, we have our Hydnum hedgehogs. I want to talk about, let's see, who's our next victim? We're going to talk about a couple of blue and purple mushrooms. So this is Lactarius indigo group. We're going to start to get into an area where I'm going to be referring to things as species groups or species sections sometimes. Essentially, a species group is just like we had a thing, we thought it was one species. Now it's clear that we have to explode it in a couple of different ways because differing genetics. And so in the case of, for instance, Lactarius indigo group, I think there's, ostensibly or presumably at least 4 of them, but they are all very distinct and recognizable. It is a blue mushroom. It has kind of this like silvery blue on top. You'll oftentimes see also these concentric growth zones a little bit and a little bit of pitting and spotting. And you have also a very distinctive divot. Even in the young mushrooms, you'll see that. But the thing that makes Lactarius indigo group, such a kick in the pants, is a couple of things. First of all, you know, you have this blue mushroom. It has these really blue gills, and I'm going to, you know, show you in a minute. But I also have an addiction to these potholes. And so, like, you know, there's a couple of different Lactarius mushrooms, the bleeding mushrooms, that have these little, like, spots, and I just can't get enough of them. And evidently that's some sort of, you know, primordial slime that creates potholes. I haven't looked at it under a microscope, but I'm going to bust out the, you know, my little hand lens in a moment and take a look. But I just can't get enough of those little potholes. And that's a very, very common feature on Lactarius indigo group. You can see these little, you know, potholes, little spots. All right, so the other thing that makes Lactarius indigo group super fun is that it bleeds blue juice absolutely everywhere. And so you can see it starting to bead up. It's very, very blue. So, you know, it's going to last on my hands for a while, and it's also very abundant. So you, you know, have a mushroom that is edible, that is, you know, from my perspective, unremarkable food-wise. Sometimes they get kind of a little mealiness that I'm not crazy about, but they're just so, like, remarkably, you know, ridiculous. And it's like slaughtering a smurf or something like that. That's what your knife looks like after handling and damaging them. So Lactarius indigo group is always super fun to find, you know, especially considering that they're just so, like, ridiculous looking. And I always wonder, like, what is the form and function of, you know, these potholes? Why does it make blue juice? All of these questions, no answers that I have. So we have Lactarius indigo group, definitely a fave. In that area of blue and purple mushrooms, we have another edible mushroom that looks very much like a butt. So yeah, there's that. This is Caesarea ochropurpurea. This is an edible mushroom that is fairly recognizable by the fact that it has really nice deep purple gills. And you can see these are, like, super deep and chunky. And so there are some other mushrooms that are purple, but they often have rings or little, you know, flaky fibrous bits, sort of cobwebby. That's the Cortinarius genus. So we have some purple Cortinarius mushrooms that look a bit like Caesarea ochropurpurea. But, you know, additionally, you have sort of a mushroom that's, like, a little bit soft and, you know, not furry, but a little on the, you know, smooth and velvety side, and tends to take this tan color, maybe with a little bit of pink or lilac. But as you know, flip the mushroom over, you see this much more, you know, cartoony purple, which I'm a very, very big fan of. And, you know, and of course, this is a mushroom that is not super determinate in its shape. A lot of them come up with very interesting whorls and mutations. And so, you know, finding one that looks like a heart or looks like a butt is not super uncommon, but delights me nonetheless. All right, so as far as purple mushrooms, you're also going to see, you know, a wide array of purple and red Russula mushrooms on the forest floor. These dudes are classic cap and stem mushrooms with white gills. They're brittle, but the purple coloration of them is, you know, a feature of some of the species, and I really enjoy finding, you know, colorful Russulas of every kind. There are, you know, in excess of 700 species, I think, and so there's not a lot of, you know, it's not time well spent to really obsess about which specific species you have in most circumstances. But, you know, if you're looking at purple mushrooms, it's definitely one you may see, you know, Russulas that are in that purple zone. And that's something that, you know, you'll see red ones, you'll see, you know, greenish ones, etc. But, you know, I figured I'd focus on purple and blue things, and so I picked this one. One other that has a slight flash of purple, but also more noticeably in the camera is green, is Russella Krustosa group. So this is a mushroom that is edible. It's quite tasty. A lot of Russulas, you know, fall apart very easily. This one's kind of brittle, but nonetheless, it may come home with me. The thing that makes Russella Krustosa group, you know, distinct from other Russula mushrooms, so you have cap and stem, brittle mushroom, white gills, but it has has this nice cracking pattern around the outer rim, and you oftentimes have a divot in the center with a lighter color, and you have sort of yellowish, tones there. You have a bit of green-gray, sometimes a little bit of purple, and again, it's a little subtle on this specimen, so you can't see it. But Russella Krustosa group, it basically is, these sort of crusty, cracking around the outer rim, sometimes more distinctively. And we do have greener ones that are Russula parvovirescens, also edible. But the ones that are sort of a lighter in color and have bits of purple are oftentimes the Krustosa group, which this is. All right, so we've talked about our edible mushrooms. Now I'm just going to show you a couple of other things just for grins. So this is a gorgeous yellow blusher. So I'm going to call this Amanita flavo rubens. Amanita amararubescens group is a group of mushrooms that all have a similar characteristic in staining a little bit on the red side as they mature. Flavo rubens is the yellow blusher, is what it's called, and I'm going to call it that on the basis of the fact that you have very distinctive, wardiness that is yellow as opposed to a sort of, more brownish color or even whitish color, which is what the other blushers do. But what you can see if you, flake off this warty material, which comes from the base when the mushroom is a baby, you can see these really attractive blushing areas. And so, blushers are really super common, but because they have this sort of unusual, streaking characteristic, they vary a lot. So I love observing them because, you oftentimes you'll see they have this sort of, cleft. Well, I don't know if there's a cleft here. Yeah, there's a cleft on this one. So you have just sort of a stumpy base. A lot of Amanitas will have big cups or, elaborate gear down here. But our blushers is just sort of a stump. But the thing that can be cool about them is it's a stump that starts to develop these ruddy stains. And so, this is a mushroom some people will eat. I don't eat blushers. I just am, probably overly cautious about, Amanitas in general. Another feature that I wanted to show you is that blushers, so Amanita flavo rubens and Amanita amararubescens group, so those are the blushers that aren't yellowy, have a gorgeous ring on the stem. And in the case of this particular species, you can see it's sort of a yellowy color, like a little fringe, or not fringe so much as a line right at the terminus of it. And in the case of the amararubescens group, that's sort of a even darker color. So you have this dark, dark trimmed skirt on the stem, and it's really something. All right, so I'm going to proceed to a mushroom called Amanita canesens. This is a really cool mushroom that looks a lot like Amanita muscaria, which is a sort of, classic Super Mario Brother mushroom, or the mushroom you see on all the 1950s kitsch, the red with white warts, dealio. But Amanita canesens is very similar insofar as it has big fatty warts that come from this chunky base when the mushroom is a baby. So it breaks apart and it leaves these dramatic sort of chunky radial zones around the base, but also these chunky warts on the cap. And the cap is sort of a brownish color. It is really attractive to me. It isn't quite as flashy as Amanita muscaria, but I just love the sort of stature of it, because the times that I've found this, it's really sort of like fat and chunky and up in your face and warty and all the things that I want a mushroom to be. So Amanita canesens group, that's what we've got here. I want to move on to a mushroom in the Amanita section caesarea group. I think this is, this is either Amanita bonangiana or Amanita arkansana. It's at least I think. So, this is a classic cap and stem mushroom as well. It has a ring on the stem that's a little bit difficult to see because this is a smaller specimen. But so it's definitely there. It's yellow. We have yellowy gills, and that's something that is really distinctive for the Caesar section of mushrooms, Amanita section caesarea. So you have Amanita jacksonii, that's a very popular edible. And, you know, besides these sort of orangey colors and, you know, a radial, I guess, striation on the cap, that's another really distinctive thing. You have these stripinesses and little divot, or not divot, excuse me, bump in the middle. You also have a little, basically universal veil or a little cup of tissue at the base. And so, you know, Amanita section caesarea contains a lot of different mushrooms, but the cup at the base and these radial lines, these striations and orangey gills often point you in that direction. There's a whole lot of those. I did a video about them, and there's a lot to be said about Amanita section caesarea that I have neither the time nor the education to do. And last but certainly not least, I want to share with you a specimen of a destroying angel. So this is the one of the could kill you mushroom species. It's most likely Amanita bisporigera, but we do have a couple of different species. I think it's 3 to 4 of them that are called destroying angels that are on the eastern, in the eastern United States. But you know, all of them are distinguished by having this big fat cup of tissue at the base. It is not like a lump. It's not, you know, very sort of indistinct or like a little foot like this dude. It is actually a cup that is very, you know, distinctively at the base. Then you have a mushroom that's just white all over. This one has taken a good bit of damage, but it would have a ring on the stem. But you also see, you know, a bit of remnants of the tissue from the base around the edge. So sometimes you have little, you know, bits hanging off the edge of the cap. But again, it's all over, just a beautiful white mushroom, but, you know, it could do a tremendous amount of liver damage should you choose to consume it in any conditions. So you can freeze it, you can fry it, you can do all kinds of things, and you cannot get rid of the amatoxins that make this mushroom poisonous and dangerous. So, in conclusion, this is just a very, very small sample of what we have. I'm going to collect up the bits that I want to put on a mushroom pizza. And I encourage you to take some time to start collecting mushrooms that are not just the edible things that you're interested in, but also the things that are like unusual and interesting looking. You know, and I think everybody who's into mushrooms, you know, you notice the ones that really stand out. And as you start to become familiar with them, you start to notice the variations between them that makes them really fun. So for instance, that Laccaria ochropurpurea that looks like a butt, that's really made this mushroom morning for me distinct and unique, even though I found Laccaria ochropurpurea hundreds of times.